Hi guys, so in this video we're going to look at solving quadratic equations. So the first thing is on the junior cert is to be able to recognize that this is a quadratic equation, and as we spoke about previously when we looked at factorizing quadratics, we said that quadratics are where we have an x where the highest power is 2. So in this, we've got a quadratic equation, and the reason why we call it an equation as opposed to an expression this time is because it's equals to 0, and that's really important. There's two ways of solving quadratic equations. The first way we're going to look at is using factors. Now, this is something that we have actually done before up to a certain point in this question, and then we just need to add a little bit onto the end. So I'm going to teach you how to solve this quadratic equation using factors. So the great thing about this is that the first step that we're going to do is going to be to factorize it, which we've already done before. So if you need to brush up on factorizing quadratics, you should look back to one of the previous videos, which is factorizing quadratics type number 3. So I'm going to take the quadratic on the left hand side, and I'm going to do what I always do. I look at the plus 7 and I say what two numbers multiply to give you plus 7, and that's going to be 7 and 1. Because it's a prime number, there's only 2 that will multiply to give 7. And then I ask myself, what signs could it be? So because it's plus 7, it means that they're both going to be a plus or they're both going to be a minus. And I'll use that in a minute. So I then set up my double brackets and I just let it equals to 0 for the moment. So I split up my x squared into x and x. And of course we're looking at 7 and 1 and we're saying, is it minus 7 and minus 1 that adds to plus 8, or is it plus 7 and plus 1? It's going to be plus 7 and plus 1. So again, that first step we've done before, but this is where we need to add in a little bit extra. When we had factorizing quadratics, there was no equals to 0, so that was your final answer. However, now we have that x plus 7 multiplied by x plus 1 is equals to 0. That means that either the first bracket or the second bracket must equals to 0. So the next step is very important. We write down that either x plus 7 is equals to 0 or x plus 1 is equals to 0. And now we just solve for x in both of these. So we need to get x by itself. So we minus 7 from both sides. Therefore, x is going to be equals to minus 7. Or on the other side, we need to solve for x. So it's minus 1 and minus 1. Therefore, x is equals to minus 1. And therefore, we have solved this using factors. We have two answers of x equals to minus 7 or x equals to minus 1. Okay guys, so again in this question we have x, its highest value being 2, but it looks slightly different to what we've been used to be seeing because we've got a number over on the right hand side. So all you need to remember for a question like this is that you need to make sure it looks like we're used to seeing it, where we have an x squared, an x on a number all on the left hand side, and we have a 0 on the right hand side. So the first step is we're going to get rid of the minus 3 by plussing 3 to both sides. Therefore, we're going to be left with x squared plus 4x plus 3 is equals to 0. We need to solve this quadratic equation. Again, we're going to use factors for this one, and I'll explain to you where we're going to recognize how the other method works in a minute. So we go and we look at the plus 3 and we say what two numbers multiply to give us plus 3. It's going to be 1 and 3, and because it's plus 3 it means that they're both going to be a plus or both numbers going to be a minus. I'm going to break up my double brackets, x and x, and because it has to add together to give me plus 4, it's going to be plus 3 and plus 1. One thing that we did in the last video just to double check our answers was doing the smiley faces, so you can do that if you want. And therefore, because it equals to 0, it means that either one of the brackets must be a 0. So therefore, we write down x plus 3 equals to 0 or x plus 1 equals to 0. And we solve for x, we minus 3 from both sides, x equals to minus 3, or we solve for x again, minus 1, therefore x equals to minus 1. And there are our two answers for this particular quadratic. Okay guys, if you can try and have a go at this question, this is what I would say would be a typical junior cert higher level question, where in part 1 they ask you to factorize, so they're not asking you to solve, and then in part 2 they say hence or otherwise solve. So they're giving you the same expression, but this time it's equals to 0, which means that you can solve it. So have a think about it, pause the video, and then you can play the video in a minute and see how you got on. Okay, so to start this question off, as usual, I'm going to look at the minus 14 and I'm going to ask myself what two numbers multiply to give me minus 14. So I think straight away you're thinking, well, it's a minus. So that means that one of the signs has to be a minus and the other sign has to be a plus. Then if we think about 14, we can say, well, there's 1 and 14 where 1 is a plus and 1 is a minus, and 2 and 7. Then I look to the plus 5 and I think to myself, will either one of those sets of numbers add or subtract, given the plus and the minus, to give me plus 5? And I'm thinking straight away that the 2 and the 7 should work. So I'm going to try that out. So I open up my double brackets, I put x, and I'm going to put in my 2 and my 7. If we do our smiley faces then, that's going to give me 2x and that's going to give me 7x. So we need to think which one of those has to be a plus and which one has to be a minus in order for it to give me plus 5. So that means that the bigger number has to be the plus, so it's plus 7 and minus 2. And then you follow your smiley faces around to figure out which number has to be the minus. So the 2 is going to be the minus and the 7 is going to be the plus. And that's the answer for part 1. The answer for part 2 then, it says hence or otherwise. That word hence in your junior cert is a great thing because it means therefore. So they're kind of saying to you, don't bother doing this whole question out again. You've already done some work in the first part. So you basically have to take your answer from the first part and let it equals to 0. So we've done the factorizing bit already, so you don't need to worry about trying to do that again. And that's equals to 0. And now all you need to say to yourself is, okay, well, this is like the second part of all the questions we've been doing. Both brackets are equal, multiplied together to give you 0. Therefore, one of them must be equals to 0. So therefore, x minus 2 is equals to 0, or x plus 7 is equals to 0. And then I solve both of them, as we've been doing. So therefore, x is equals to 2, or x is equals to minus 2. And that's your answer.